What does it take to make a great grape? And how can you tell before it's too late? When it comes to buying fresh, ripe, in-season grapes, always look at the fruit's plumpness. The roundness and overall shape of the grape is one of the primary indicators of peak flavor and ripeness. A firm, round body means it's packed with juice and hasn't yet started to break down or deteriorate after being picked. Grapes that are firm and round to the touch have a well-balanced water content for a more refreshing bite. These grapes usually strike the right note of sweet flavor and succulence. Avoid grapes that are starting to turn soft or that have a dull or wrinkled appearance. They may be overripe or have started to go bad. You might also find them mushy, hard, or just slightly chewy and off in texture.
You don't want to wait to eat your raisins?
No.
Why not?
Because they'll turn into grapes?
Not sure that's the way it works.
Yes.
If they're too firm, they might have been picked before becoming ripe and could taste bland or bitter. Unlike bananas, grapes don't continue to ripen off the vine. Their flavor and texture will stay the same until they begin to rot. So don't buy an unripe cluster hoping it will improve over time. The best way to measure the plumpness of the grapes you're buying is to simply roll a few back and forth between your fingertips. They should feel dense but should still yield slightly to pressure. If they're overly hard or soft, pick a different bag. You may have heard that many top chefs sniff berries, melons, peaches, and citrus fruit before buying them in order to gauge their freshness. Add grapes to that list. Why is the scent of a fresh grape such a key indicator of its overall ripeness? Thank Mother Nature and the way the ripening process takes place, not just in grapes, but in fruits of all types. Before they're ripe, many fruits don't have a strong odor, but as they ripen, organic compounds created as part of the ripening process begin to collect in and around the surface of the fruit, giving it a fresh, sweet, fruity, and somewhat floral scent. The more these compounds build up, the riper the fruit is. Some industries now even use computerized scent detectors to measure levels of these compounds during harvest. The scent of fresh, ripe grapes will vary depending on type. Some grapes used in wine production will have deep, rich, or spicy and earthy aromas. For fresh table grapes, you should be looking for a light, sweet, melon-like, almost musky scent. Avoid grapes with hints of sourness or vinegar-like scents, or those that are overpoweringly sweet-smelling. That usually means the grapes may have already begun to ferment and spoil.
We can't have that.
Once you've tested the firmness and scent of the grapes you're considering buying, it's time for a quick inspection of the stem. There you'll find a number of clues about the overall quality and freshness of any grapes you buy. Start by looking at the color of the stem. The stem on fresh, recently picked grapes should be green and flexible. If the stem is crisp, brown, or woody, that means the grapes have not been picked recently and that their stem has had time to completely dry out. Even if the grapes look okay, it means they're far from fresh and will likely spoil quickly when you get them home. Next, press the stem a bit between your fingernails. Is it moist? If so, that is a good clue that your grapes will be moist as well. Finally, consider the firmness of the stem. It should be tough and somewhat resistant to tearing. If the stem falls apart easily or the grapes easily fall from the stem, that's another indicator that the grapes you're looking at are overripe and you'd be better off selecting a different bag. You see a beautiful bag of grapes hanging out at the grocery store and buy it based on sight alone, only to discover that those delicious grapes you were so anxious to devour all contain seeds. It's a common blunder many of us make and another reason that you can't just grab and go when buying grapes. Some amazing grapes do contain seeds, so you shouldn't give up on seeded grapes entirely. Just be sure to always check the variety you're buying to avoid disappointment later on. For those of us who don't know our grape varieties, here's a quick primer on the varieties you see in most stores. First, the seedless varieties. Thompson or Sultana grapes are small to medium-sized, greenish yellow, and seedless. Niagara, which are sometimes called white grapes, are medium-sized and seedless. Flame and Crimson grapes are both medium-sized, reddish-purple, and seedless. Now we get to the seeded varieties. Red Globe grapes are large and round, hence the name, and have seeds. Concord grapes are smaller, tend to be dark blue, and have a large seed. Muscat grapes are medium-sized, golden yellow, and seeded.
Did you know that the red Muscat grape is one of the #1 grapes sold in Latin America?
Is it okay to taste a grape in the grocery store before you buy, or is that theft? Most sources say it's completely fine, but a few sticklers insist that if you don't wind up taking the particular bag you sample from, it's technically theft.
It's almost like I'm daring people to try and stop me. Is it really stealing?
Whichever side of the discussion you land on, there's no debating the fact that tasting a sample grape remains the best and overall most effective way to measure the freshness of any bunch of grapes you're considering buying. If you can't rinse your sample grape before trying it, at least wipe it down as best you can before you bite in. You probably won't need to try more than one to find out if the bunch is any good. Even if the grapes you're considering buying don't look that gnarly, always spend a bit of time checking to see if the fruit has any significant brown spots or discoloration. Not doing so almost guarantees you're going to end up throwing away at least some of your purchase. Look over the full bag. Sometimes one fine-looking bunch will have a few hidden duds. In most cases, the brown spots on grapes are bruises. Grapes are delicate, and any sort of mishandling in growing, harvesting, or transportation of the fruit can cause it to develop this sort of spot. Brown spots can also be caused by fungal infections, insects, or premature spoilage. Whatever the cause, it's generally not a good idea to buy grapes with brown spots, as they tend to be less fresh and have much shorter shelf life than undamaged grapes. The good news is that in most cases, these brown spotted grapes are completely edible. If you find a lot on grapes you've already bought, you just need to consume them as quickly as possible before they have time to get worse. If you find a couple that have become too soft or mushy to handle easily, throw them away so they don't spoil the entire bunch. Locally grown produce is almost always fresher and better tasting than imports, and that's as true for grapes as it is for anything else. When looking for great tasting, quality grapes, it's a mistake not to consider where the grapes you're looking at come from before you buy them. Luckily, grocery stores are here to help you out. Most should have clear, easy-to-spot language either on the grape's packaging or on the display telling you where the grapes came from. Are they from your state or a neighboring region? Or are they imported from another country? The closer the grapes originated to where you live, the better they'll likely be. Grapes that have been harvested, packed onto a train or boat, and spent days in transit and customs before reaching your local store just aren't as fresh. Locally grown grapes were also likely picked at the peak of ripeness, while the grapes that need extra transportation were likely picked before peak ripeness to ensure they would survive the trip. If you have limited options, imported grapes are usually serviceable, but otherwise buying tasty, locally grown grapes is a no-brainer. It can be tempting to dig into that big bag of fresh, beautiful grapes as soon as you get them home, but don't do it. It's never a good idea to eat fruit you've bought in any market without washing it first. Besides dirt, dust, and debris, grapes can also be contaminated with human waste, harmful bacteria, pesticides, chemicals, and other residues that may be harmful to your health. In fact, grapes are one of the 12 dirtiest fruits and vegetables you can buy, according to some studies. As you'd expect, most of that dirt comes from being grown outdoors or gets picked up through the harvesting and transportation process. The best way to clean them is to rinse them under cold, running water for at least 30 seconds. If you're feeling extra cautious, you can also use a vegetable brush to lightly scrub their skin. Don't wash your grapes until just before you plan to eat them. Rinsing fruit and then putting it back into the fridge wet promotes mold growth and will speed up how quickly your grapes go bad. Whether the store is having a sale and the grapes are cheap, or they just look so delicious you feel the need to load up, it's never a good idea to buy grapes in bulk unless you have a specific plan for using them quickly. Sure, it might seem like a convenient and cost-saving idea, but if you're like most of the country, you're inevitably going to end up throwing at least some of those grapes away because they spoil before you can use them. Like fresh berries, the biggest problem with grapes is that they have a relatively short shelf life compared to other produce. Most will only last in the fridge for a few days before they start breaking down and going bad. Combine this with their incredibly delicate skin and their susceptibility to mold when exposed to too much moisture, and they end up being one of the most common sources of food waste. Some estimates suggest that up to a quarter of grapes sold in the country end up in landfills because they go bad before someone has the chance to eat them. Already have surplus grapes at home that you aren't going to be able to get to in time? Toss them in the freezer. Rinsed, destemmed frozen grapes are a great summer snack. You can also use your extra grapes to make homemade grape juice or jam. It's easier than you'd think. So you have a bag of perfectly ripe grapes at home and you're ready to stash them away until you have time to eat them. Remember that how you store them is key to preserving that fresh flavor as long as possible. For the best tasting grapes, store your fruit in the refrigerator as soon as possible after you purchase them. If the bag or box the grapes came in is perforated, you can store them as is. Don't store them in a solid plastic bag with no holes. You want air to be able to circulate over the grapes to avoid moisture buildup, which speeds up spoilage. Consider adding a paper towel to the bottom of the bag under the grapes to absorb extra moisture. Also, keep them on the stems. Grapes keep fresh longer when they are connected to their vine. Finally, avoid overcrowding your grapes and never set anything on top of them or push too many other things up against them. You want to avoid bruising the fruit as much as possible for maximum shelf life. Try to eat all of the grapes you buy within a week. If you go much longer, they tend to start losing their flavor and texture. Enjoy!